but she was unleashing me, and her own fierceness was a model. It said I can be fierce. I don't have to be rolling up on folk, but I can be passionate about learning. I can be passionate about the things that are important to me. I can find my own genius and capacity and giftedness. Yeah, that class with her was a gift.
Welcome to the Whole Student Podcast with Cal Balabin. Whole Student refers to the magical moment when a student is fully seen, heard, and known. This is the spark of a relationship between student and teacher, where the former is catalyzed on a journey beyond what they thought possible, and the latter is a proud advisor cheering from the sidelines. The Whole Student Podcast asks guests to reflect back to their moment, to the person who became a transformative teacher in their lives, and on the journey they were set upon. Our guest today is Zaretta Hammond. Zaretta Hammond is a national consultant and author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, promoting authentic engagement and rigor for culturally and linguistically diverse students. Here is my copy. Zaretta is a former high school and community college expository writing instructor. For the past 20 years, she has supported schools and other institutions in deepening their understanding and application of culturally responsive practices. She currently runs the Culturally Responsive Education by Design Online PLC, a 6-month intensive, inquiry-based, professional learning experience to build instructional capacity to use culturally responsive tools and practices effectively. Ms. Hammond is a strong literacy advocate who sits on the board of trustees for the Center for the Collaborative Classroom. She's also a member of the advisory board for the Consortium for Reading Education, CORE. It is my great pleasure to welcome Zaretta to the Whole Student Podcast. Welcome, Zaretta.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So Zaretta, I'm going to jump right into it and ask you to describe yourself as a student. What words would you have used to describe Zaretta, the young Zaretta, as a student?
First would be intellectually curious. Take that as one word. Hellion would be the next.
Okay.
Independent thinker. Advocate, rebel. All of those rolled up into one.
Wow. Okay. So take us to that point where that student felt seen, heard, and known for the first time. Set the stage for us. What was happening? What class was it?
I think it's a matter of, where I want to start, because for me, a little bit of my own backstory. My mother was a teen parent. We grew up in the projects in Hunters Point. She lied about our address so we could go to a predominantly white and Asian school. And there weren't a lot of folks that looked like me, either teaching or as students. So, they kind of turned a blind eye to it. So at the same time, you can take the girl out of the hood, but as they say, and that came to school with me as I kind of defended myself from not being labeled and placed in some boxes. So the teacher that saw me, who didn't put me in a box, was really Miss Alexander, my first grade teacher, who taught me to read.
Wow.
And really just nurtured that love, that intellectual curiosity part, right? Regardless of what everybody else was saying about how we showed up and what we did, because we were just being culturally congruent, who we were. She just latched on to my love of learning, my love of words, my desire to read. And I still have vivid memories of her kind of like, come on over to the rug and let's read, and turning me loose in the library. Yeah. So I think it starts there. I'd say also 5th grade, Miss Morris. Miss Morris was my first Black teacher. And Miss Morris saw the hellion, and she was like, girl, let me come on over here. I need to pull your coattails on some stuff. So in one way, she saw me differently, right? She saw that I had a lot of potential. And what I couldn't see in myself, she saw and really said, hey, listen, step into that. You don't have to push back so hard. You don't have to prove who you are. You are, good enough as you are, and nurture these other things. So she kind of helped me fly right.
Fair enough. So Miss Alexander saw you first. You saw Miss Morris also saw you, and they both had impact on you.
Yeah.
And you talk about this in your book. You talk about the students that were coming into schools from different walks of life as you were progressing through schools that weren't prepared, and the teachers weren't prepared to support them, and you had these transformative teachers having seen you so you can come
Yeah.
alive as a student. Um, wow. If you were to talk to them today, and if you're still in touch with them, what might you say?
Well, I think both of them have passed on. I'm old enough
Mm,
to have, to now
mm,
actually be in that almost elder, right, auntie
mm,
status. So, so I just call back their memory, but I certainly would remind them that their instincts were correct. The
mhm,
instincts to just not put a student in a box and to nurture that relationship. I think for Miss Alexander to find the connection. Right? What she
mhm,
did was we were very different. She was
mhm,
a white woman, older white
mhm.
woman from, the suburbs in predominantly white environments, but
Yeah.
which we connected around the love of words and reading and stories and adventure, and she
Wow.
nurtured that. Miss
Wow.
Morris, African American woman,
Yeah.
she understood what that meant for me to be walking and navigating those spaces, and she nurtured the best parts of my fierceness and allowed me to have social emotional intelligence to regulate
Mhm,
other parts. But both of them, I would uh, uh, acknowledge them and thank them for not, adhering to these narratives of what a black girl could be or who
mhm.
she is, and limiting it around those narratives, and to only see that part of me, but to
Wow.
nurture all of me.
Wow. The idea of seeing you fully, that being seen fully. Did you end up, as you went through the journey, did you end up having to measure up your future teachers against this model that you got to experience both in first grade and later?
Yeah, I always was, and this was the gift I think Miss Morris gave me in terms of me understanding who I am and to
Mm,
not kind of fall into the various paradigms that people wanted to place me in. And
right.
here's the thing, what's really important about that. Sometimes it wasn't just, I'm going to push back on you thinking I'm less than, but
Hmm.
the idea that sometimes I diminish my own light and that I turned
Wow.
down myself because, oh, I don't wanna be that angry black girl, or I don't wanna be, so I started to kinda conform based on what messages
Mhm.
I was getting, and
Wow.
I had the honor and privilege to have teachers who said, "You don't have to edit yourself.
Right.
You don't have to do that." So that was certainly Miss Morris. By the time I got to high school, that was Miss McKenna. Miss McKenna was a white woman,
Hmm.
hippie, wearing the Birkenstocks, and it was environmental science. And
Wow.
again, we connected around the not only just intellectual curiosity, but her fierce belief in caring for the environment.
Wow.
And, she was climate change advocate before there was a climate change
Yeah.
advocacy. She taught me, she taught me so many things about caring for the earth and why,
Wow.
nuclear fusion wasn't a good idea and the
Yeah.
half-life of that, and what to eat. So it was all about this application of science to how we live. And she
Wow.
put it in a racial equity paradigm before anybody was even talking about that. Like
She did.
what's
What
happening
did
in
she? How
your
did she
neigh
do that?
she asked everybody to go and look at what's happening in your neighborhood. And so
Wow.
what she said is this shows up differently in different ways. So she was tuning a lens and giving it language before I even knew that. So she was seeing me. So when I brought to her like, "Hey, what about this?"
Wow.
And she was able to kind of put some words around it. "Here's some science. Go research
Wow.
that." And had me reading things that honestly would have been beyond what anyone else was giving me because they were putting me in a little bucket. They were putting me in a little, little cage, little
My
cognitive
goodness.
cage. But she was unleashing me, and her own fierceness was a model. It said I can be fierce. I don't have to be
Yeah.
rolling up on
Yeah.
folk,
Yeah.
but I can be passionate about learning. I can be passionate about the things
Wow.
that are important to me. I can find my own genius and
Mm.
capacity and giftedness. Yeah,
Mhm.
my that class with her was a gift.
Wow. And I love what you said. she was unleashing me. Like she saw all of what I could do and let me be who I was. Oh, that's brilliant. So there's a point that I've asked all of our guests a question. It's a fun little question to imagine what would happen if you could bring 5 of your teachers in life to a meal, and who they might be. And you've mentioned 3 transformative teachers, and they may very well be at that meal. It might be different. So Zaretta, who would you bring to the table?
Wow. I certainly would bring Miss McKenna, and I'd bring Mr. Hudson. He was my 10th grade
Mm,
teacher, social studies, only African American man I ever had, one of the very few men that I had as a
wow.
teacher all through my K-12 experience.
Wow.
And he was a wonderful warm demander. He was a warm demander and saw me in a different way. His was, I see you out here in these hallways, but he always kind of like invited me to level up. He didn't, wasn't
Hmm.
a hard ass like Miss Morris. Miss Morris scared me. Like I don't know if I'm inviting Miss Morris to dinner, but I'm like, she definitely helped me level up. But
Okay.
certainly Mr. Huston was be there. Out of respect, I'd have Miss Morris there. I'd also have a couple of teachers, Miss Martini, I can think of, who was my fourth grade teacher. I gave her the blues. They're just a couple I just need to,
Mm.
invite them to dinner to apologize because I was in my wild child phase and
Right.
just like
Right.
a couple of gym teachers, same thing, going head to head with them.
Mm.
Um, so it
Mm.
just, I think having the conversation to honor them in the sense that each one of them brought something different, even those that I went head to
Right.
head with that I felt like really didn't
Hmm.
understand me. And it's really just to
Hmm.
show them this is that thing that was there. Because so
Hmm.
often children are trying to come into their own, and it's like anything else.
Hmm.
It's just messy when it comes forth. It's
Hmm.
wonky and funky and unleashed. And part of what we have to do as those that are nurturing them is to help them tame it and claim it and
Mm.
nurture it and
Mm.
polish it and find just the right rhythm for
Hmm.
them. And too often what we tell folks to do, tell children to do particularly, is just put that light under a bushel. Like that's just too much. You're too extra. I was
That's right.
I was extra
That's right.
extra. And the reality
Right.
is every teacher has to be able to, understand that children are going to come. So that dinner really would be part
Yeah.
honoring them, part letting them see kind of what the end product, because that's one of the challenges teachers don't get is seeing the
Hmm.
end product. They have to have a proxy vision for who that child can be. And they have to
That's
look
right.
past the
That's right.
labels, not just how they would label, but the ways that we label Black and brown children in this society.
Hmm.
And they're part
Hmm.
of being, an abolitionist teacher or culturally responsive teacher is
Hmm.
having that lens to look beyond what society tells you. That
Right.
child can only aspire to this, or this is the aptitude we see now. And the reality is,
Hmm.
all those teachers that I named had a proxy vision. They saw something I
Mm.
could not see, and they were a whole space for me until I can come into that. And I just really would honor them and continue to have conversations about what I've learned as a teacher in
Hmm.
terms of what that means to hold space, to see students. And when you see them, what you gonna do with that information?
Exactly. Yeah. Zaretta, is this is wonderful, and I never right now I usually end, but I never do this, but I have to do it because you're a person who not only noticed the transformative teachers in your life, but you noticed what it was that made them transformative. For those that will read your book, you talk about being the girl from Hunters Point, going to school across the way, and also noticing the students that were coming in and the disconnects they were having, and you really analyze that. You use a data-driven approach. The science, that environmental science, it still had an impact. You went in
That's
and you're
right.
like, ask the questions. And I really want folks to pick up this book because I will tell you, as a person who worked in the independent school world for a long time, there are a lot of opportunities for professional development that come along our way, and they'll all talk about the problem, but very few talk about the tools for the solution. And culturally responsive teaching is about that transformative teaching, seeing students below the surface of that iceberg and really uplifting them so they can thrive in the classroom.
It is. And here's the thing I will add, and I appreciate that endorsement of it, and helping teachers understand this is not just about cheerleading. This is
Hmm.
about helping students nurture that intellectual capacity they have. That's all
That's
the
right.
teachers I named weren't just kind of like blowing smoke and like, hey, you could do good. This is not the grit and growth mindset kind of
Hmm.
conversation. This is
Hmm.
really about, all right, build your skill and capacity, just like a journeyman carpenter or apprentice would. You
Mm,
need to get in there and have that time to kind of hone those skills. And the
that's
only
right.
way you hone it is by doing something, right?
Hmm.
Engaging in the productive struggle, having intellectual curiosity, right? We got to be more Mr. Miyagi, right?
Yeah.
Than wax
Yeah.
on and wax off versus
Yeah.
I just need to cheerlead you. And this
Hmm.
is just about engagement. That's what I see. And this what I want to get over and across to people in culturally responsive teaching of the brain is competence precedes confidence. We
That's
can't
right.
just ask our students to be confident. And in
Hmm.
order to build that competence, we are going to have to take them to the edge, the growing edge of their own learning and capacity. They're not going with a stranger. They're not going with someone who doesn't believe with them.
That's right.
Vygotsky says they are going to go with a mentor and someone they trust.
Hmm.
Like, "I
Hmm.
got you. We
That's
won't
right.
fumble around, but, mistakes are just information,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
not confirmation of your low intelligence," right? You gotta
Hmm.
be in their ear telling them that, and I think that's a thing we miss. We have
That's right.
overcorrected toward this
Hmm.
growth mindset
Hmm.
engagement thing, and we
Hmm.
miss how do we help them hone their capacity to carry more
Right.
and more of that cognitive load.
Right. Right. Oh my goodness. Zaretta, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your spirit, your story, and your time. Appreciate you. And for those listening, class might be dismissed, but there's some stuff that you can do to improve who you are in the classroom and understand and acknowledge the teachers in your life. Definitely pick up culturally responsive teaching in the brain by Zaretta Hammond.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you. The Whole Student Podcast has been brought to you by Duncast. Produced by J.D. Scroggin, the Director of Marketing and Communication at the Dunn School, and co-produced by Brandon Scott of Comfort Food. Thank you for joining us.